Welcome to the Digital Forester podcast, where we speak to forestry leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of forestry. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Forester podcast. Today, I'm joined by Levi Farrand, who is the CEO of Deep Forestry. Deep Forestry is a company that develops fully autonomous LiDAR drones that are capable of flying beneath the forest canopy. Using cameras and LiDAR sensors, these drones are self-piloting, meaning that they're able to navigate between the trees all on their own, and using AI technology are able to map and measure pretty much everything and anything that it encounters. So let's have a conversation with Levi on the things that are happening at Deep Forestry. Levi, how are you doing today?
Yeah, doing great, thanks.
Good stuff, good stuff. And customary to this podcast is to ask our guests where we're reaching you.
Yeah, so I'm in Uppsala in Sweden, so it's just next to Stockholm.
Oh, very cool, very cool, very cool. I should have visited you last time I was in Stockholm. My friends there. I've been there probably like more times in the last few years than the decades before. But good to know. Next time I'll stop in and say a little hello. So while I looked at your background, I got lots of questions in terms of how you came to be where you are. Because one, like adventure sports, diver, reserve naval diver for the Royal Australian Navy. Then I think you're a little bit short on the number of master's degrees you have because I think last check you had three. Maybe you should get a couple more. But maybe walk me through your journey of how you came to be where you are. What's your background? Like, did foresters in there? Are you more on the engineering side, or how did you get
Yeah,
to be in Uppsala from what I'm assuming is Australia as a
yeah,
start?
yeah, for sure, Kevin. It's been quite a journey. I mean, I guess originally I'm from Darwin, which is in the center of Australia, up the top near Indonesia. And my parents, they were actually they spent a lot of time in the Aboriginal communities out in a place called Arnhem Land on the Wessel Islands, which is a very small community out there called Gallywinku. And it was quite an adventurous kind of teenage years, let's put it that way. So my dad was out there building on those communities, and it kind of led me a little bit towards an ambition of just having kind of an adventurous life. I mean, once I met a kayaker who was kayaking across the whole top of Australia, and he stopped by our little island for some water and these kinds of things. So that was kind of my goal in the younger years, was like figure out how to have an adventurous life. And then I started doing some university. Uh, it was going pretty good, but I lost kind of interest. Maybe I was a bit too young for university when I first started. And then that brought me into kind of a long period where I was out doing this kind of extreme tour guiding and stuff like that, surfing instructor. I was doing climbing and four-wheel driving in the deserts and all this kind of stuff. And I had no idea at the time, but it actually kind of it set me up really usefully for being like a leader in a company, because I'd have like 20 people or so with me, like out there in the desert for like 15 days, some Germans, some Japanese, and something like this. And we would be out in the desert. I'd have to make everyone kind of get along. And then in a very usually harsh conditions, like maybe whitewater rafting or doing something like that. And so I learned a lot about people for like many years, 5, 6, 7 years or something like that. And then I was integrating that also in between university and things like that. Um, and my goal actually, funnily enough, I was thinking like, I'll move to Cairns in North Australia and I'll try to kayak to Papua New Guinea. That was like, I'm gonna do this. That was like my kind of goal at the time. And what I found out was my my I think it was my uncle at the time, and he told me like, hey, you've got to try out for this university thing. There's this option and this opportunity where you can, go to Sweden or do all these things. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'll just apply on the side. And that's actually where I was doing hydrology, I think, at the time, and that's where I got this opportunity to go to Sweden, and that was just absolutely amazing. So instead of kind of kayaking to Papua New Guinea, I took the educational option, and that's where I started my master's degrees over there. And I should have seen it coming. I mean, it was absolutely inevitable. It took me not so long. And then I basically, I fell in love with a Swedish girl, and now I've got two little babies and a
I
business.
knew it.
And
I knew it. There
yeah,
had to be a love connection there. I knew it. I knew it. I should have made a bet with you at the start. So that's amazing. So you literally went from the southern hemisphere all the way up to the northern hemisphere and
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
north there, and that's why you ended up in Uppsala. Very, very, very
yeah.
interesting. So if I was to ask your mom and dad, would they be surprised where you landed?
No, not at all. They knew that I was gonna be like out there in the world. They were very encouraging, but that's the problem with encouraging parents. You end up being so far apart from them when your children become these, wild spirits, I guess. But thankfully, Isabella, my partner, she keeps my feet on the ground, and uh, I've actually transitioned towards the adventure being the company now, because I've stayed in Uppsala for quite some time now with this company, which historically I've moved around a lot and things like that. And it's been really exciting because now the company is bringing me, to Japan, and, bringing me across all different parts of the world to, show the technology. And, it's really fun because we're flying autonomous robots in like remote forests for sometimes ESG, like rainforest stuff, or sometimes commercial forestry. And yeah, the experience is not, it's not a way that I didn't ever expect to be a CEO or something like that. I kind of fell backwards into it. So but yeah, it all worked out, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Sometimes the journey in life is not a straight line, and for some of us, we're okay being on a roller coaster and not knowing
Yeah.
where the next turn is, and that's part of the fun there. So you mentioned the work with Deep Forestry in terms of autonomous drones and whatnot. So should I think of you as a forester? Should I think of you as an engineer guy? Should I think of you as a digital forester, or which camp should we think of
Yeah, for
Levi
sure.
from?
It's a difficult one because the journey is kind of, I started in hydrology, was really my thing. So it's kind of geoinformatics, but also geochemistry. And I was blessed to work for the Swedish Geological Survey kind of out of university. And I ran their mass spectrometry and optical emission spectrometry laboratory just for a little while there. And during that period, I was working for the government, and we went to like the World Forum of Raw Materials and things. And my bosses and seniors were really supportive to get me out on all of these kinds of things. And at the time, I was really ambitious for whatever reason when we're kicking off on these things. And on the side, I kind of found this opportunity to apply for some government grants, right, for these ideas, because I could see, it's like 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I could see that drones were just skyrocketing, and they seem so fascinating, and all of these things. So I kind of I was with my father-in-law, and he's the CEO of one of the banks here in Sweden, and his job, because he's got a lot of insurance that he works with, was to have vast holdings of forests, and those holdings had to be assessed all the time to make sure that his books were correct and that he could purchase forests and things like that. And so while I was there, kind of being a hydrologist, it was on the Christmas table, and he was complaining about, if Lars surveys his forest, then he's got to add 20%. And if Eric does it, he's got to minus 5%. And you have to have these personal relationships to really know what you're buying. And in my head, I was like, the forest doesn't change, right? It's there, it's permanent, and it doesn't matter who's looking at it. It's what's there is there. And I kind of knew a little bit about, LiDAR and drones, and I thought this should easily be solved. Someone's got to be doing this. And so from there, I reached out to my kind of co-founders who were actual engineers. So I don't have an engineering background, but I have a background working with really technical things. So, optical emissions, mass spectrometry, and it's they're big machines, and you have to be able to discuss the positives and the negatives of certain behaviors of how you do the scientific process. And you're always describing this, whether it's in papers or research or whatever. Although I was still a rookie, I was pretty young at the time, I actually got pretty good at just talking about technical things, I think. And then also onboarding, or being able to be onboarded by real experts in the field, like the guy who actually, maintains the equipment. They really know what they're doing, and you kind of have to know how it works a little bit. So you have to get onboarded to a minimum kind of level. And so by being able to discuss these technical topics, I could learn about how autonomous drones work or how LiDAR mapping works. And I could kind of, filter between the real technical experts that we've been blessed to have on our team and the job that needs to be done. And so the mixture between being a tour guide, out there doing crazy stuff and learning about how people work together and how to make like really good teams thrive in sometimes confined or difficult circumstances, and then mixing that with the ability to kind of understand something relatively new and very highly technical.
So, Levi, I wanted to ask you about how Deep Forestry came to be. I think in my research, I saw that Deep Forestry was incubated in the Creative Destruction Lab a little bit in that 2018 timeframe. But maybe tell me how Deep Forestry came about, how the experience with CDL went, and where you are today in terms of that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was it was really exciting times in the early days. We started as a partnership between my co-founder and I, that was just the two of us. And he had like basically the same vision as my CEO father-in-law from his banking days on how to make a team thrive. And so in those days, we managed to secure an engineer relatively quickly through my climbing gym, climbing buddies, and they knew a guy who knew a guy, and this guy was a super genius. So basically, he came in and built the first autonomous drones using the cash from the income that my co-founder and I were earning from our standard jobs, and we were just feeding him technology. So he kind of got free computer systems and lidars, and so it was kind of a good deal for everyone. I could talk. My co-founder could do the finances, and this engineer was just brilliant at doing the tech side. And so then we managed to get through with these wonderful incubators that kind of set us off on the right path, gave us a bit of directionality, enabled us to focus down on our core market. We got a few early adopter projects where we earn, 10, 20,000 US dollars or so for individual clients, just showing them what we could do. We had no idea that we were so early. Like, I think it was like 5 years after this, we had research companies or institutions come and ask us, like, hey, we're going to build an autonomous drone. Maybe you guys could get some funding and help. And you're like, oh, you mean this thing we already built, like 5 years ago? So we didn't actually realize we were ahead of the curve because we were doing these live demos. So yeah, it was just really exciting times, basically like shoestring budget, no agreements, pizza nights on Thursday nights where we would figure out what to do next. And everyone was kind of running their other jobs, very, very startup-y. And then we managed to, I connected to a professor in Sweden who was like, he'd won a lot of awards and things for his impact on AI. And we managed to convince him of the vision of like, there's going to be like thousands of these drones. There's thousands of field workers. There's no reason we can't have thousands of drones. And every day they're gathering data, 10 hectares, 20, 30, 40, 50 hectares a day, thousands of drones, 50 hectares a day. That's a lot of data for research, And he was like, oh, yeah. So he was kind of excited about that prospect. And we kind of all put our heads together in one meeting, and we brought in some angel investors who were willing to take kind of a risk. And the angel investors, I guess their thoughts was either this professor is going to make something amazing as an output, an AI output, or these, crazy founders are going to make some amazing robotics. Or if we're really lucky, both of them will combine and we'll get like the ultimate product.
Right.
And so they kind of took that risk.
Right, right. So amazing. So really what I'm hearing, you had the engineering talent, that you found through your network, in this case, rock climbing network.
Yeah.
And this is the power of networks we know, right? I think there's a sciencey thing out there. The larger your network is, the more likely you're going to be successful in whatever you're doing. And I do subscribe to that. And then you had some science there in terms of the faculty providing it in. So when we put those together, what problem are we actually trying to solve? So we've talked about drones, the autonomy,
Mm.
forestry. So today, when we think about deep forestry, how would you articulate, here's the problem we're trying to solve, and why is it relevant, or why is there so much interest in what deep forestry is doing today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the image behind you in your background is a quite good representation of the problem you're trying to solve. So, from a machine learning perspective, the forest is a lot of similar kind of shaped objects and similar colors. So, if you're looking to measure things in the forest, and there's a lot of distortions, things, leaves in the way, the real world is really, really complex. So, if we look at autonomous vehicles, they've kind of solved a lot of the problems with a stop sign versus a bicycle, or a person versus a car. They're very different. But in the forest environment, things are kind of very, very similar looking, all the same colors and shapes, but also the same species can look differently at a different time of the year, right? And so from a machine learning perspective, if you really want something to measure everything, it has to be able to be trained very, very cost effectively. And if you retrain it, you can't lose the other knowledge that you've had. And I think, if I remember rightly from the words that I've heard from my developers, it's something like class agnostic meta learning, or something like that, where you can independently retrain these things. Now, I probably got the wrong words, but it's some cool set of acronyms to describe it. And that is kind of the main machine learning problem, which is not necessarily the main problem for the industry, right? What the industry wants to know is just what's there, right? And that can be relatively simple from an industrial forestry, from a monoculture perspective, where you're saying like, okay, here's a monoculture and we want to make smart decisions about how to manage that. So we want to know the thickness and shape of every tree so that we can identify, how much value we have there and what decisions to make in the future to maximize growth, right? Now, to do that, you need the data, right? And that is kind of easy data for us to get because we're just segmenting individual kind of poles in the environment and measuring them. And so that was like our market entry point. But we came in at a point where, 5 years ago or so, there was this massive upswing in all the carbon credit projects, but there was a lot of transparency issues, with how these are calculated and things like that. So, the business name of our partnership in the beginning was Carbon UAV, because we could see that was just a way to add transparency that the industry needed. And that's become more and more kind of forefront at the moment as well. And so what we designed was kind of a system where you can just press the button, and it doesn't matter who presses the button or how biased they are, or what their underlying incentives are. That number will always come back the same, and you can always go out there and audit it with any other technology, and you'll have the precise tree position, and you'll be able to match these two things up. So, auditing, transparency, and understanding, but in a really scalable way, where we've designed it so I might even dive into the tech. Is that a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely, sure.
Yeah.
For our listeners, Levi's grabbing one of the drones, reaching behind and grabbing one. Yep.
Yeah, so I've got a drone here with me, and on the front we've got the sensor stack, which is kind of one of the key pieces of the technology, and it's got the LiDAR on the front, and this is an Ouster LiDAR that shoots kind of up and down, so it can get to the top of the canopy and the bottom with the laser beam, and the laser does the measurements, and then we've got the cameras on the front, and so what that means is that we're gathering multimodal data, right? So in precision timing. And so we can run machine learning from the camera data or machine learning from the LiDAR data. And all of that information can be transposed back and forth. So if you've got like a really good measurement from the camera, but a bad measurement from the LiDAR, you can select which one has the optimal kind of decision on what that object might be or what its size is or something like that. And so by having that in the same platform and then connected to the AI pipeline and having the autonomous robotics to acquire that data in the same way, so the pilot can't even influence the data coming in, Then we've built a pipeline that can literally be trained, for $500 or $1,000 to learn something new, because every species and every client and everywhere in the world, they want to know something different. I'm looking for this tree, or my trees have this disease, or I'm looking for I lose money when my trees are split, and I want to find out where that is. So each of those clients, we design the system so ideally they don't pay a lot in consultancy. We just give an hourly consultancy rate for data labeling to a third party. We don't really make money on that part, and we just get the system working. And so the system just gets better and better and better at every different person kind of collaborating with their input and insights about how to use that system. And then the idea is that we've got this constant kind of operational system that is learning more and more species and more about the environment and mapping it precisely. And then you can go back and do time series analysis, or what's called multivariate analysis, where you might influence the environment by different types of watering or different influences you have, and you can find out kind of how those influences affecting things over time. So we're really data providers, and we rely on experts like yourself, Kevin, for how to use that data best to add value through the value chain, right? Because you can make better decisions at harvesting, you can make better decisions at transportation, you can make better sustainable forestry decisions, you can do maybe uneven aged forestry, where you're selecting and plucking just certain trees out at certain times. You can line that up with market dynamics, right? So if you've got all of the data about what's in your forest, and maybe you've surveyed 500,000 hectares, after a year or two with us, you can just wait for the market dynamics to change, and you'll know, or maybe your harvester location, and you'll know exactly, okay, the harvest is pretty close to this and the market's about right. Let's tell this owner that he's going to get a peak on his timber, and that timber might have a shape too, like a diameter and a certain length. And we can do like pre-bucking, right? Because we have everything, a 3D model of every tree, and we have like near basically perfect understanding of the shape of that entire tree as well.
Yeah.
It might be a good time to it's just incredible what we can do with the
Yeah. So
system.
before we go there, let me jump in. So what I'm kind of hearing is that with the technology, you're essentially focused on I'll use that word, digital twin of the forest, if you will, a digital representation
Yep.
of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I heard was, hey, we've got some technology here that we can measure these trees probably more cost effectively, quicker, going forward. And yet there's this really exciting future. You talked about bucking, maybe if you know every single tree, the form, how could you use
Mm-hmm.
that information in your planning. And you jump in if I'm getting
No,
this
it's
this
right. Yeah, you're on
wrong
the
per
money.
se. So when I
Yep.
think about deep forestry, how should I think about it? You talk about, we're a data provider. So does that mean you sell the drone hardware and technology to other forest consultants to use, or is it more, hey, hire us, kind of like a SaaS subscription,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll come out and do this
Yep.
work for you? How should our listeners and viewers think about deep forestry? Is it a hardware provider, or is it a hybrid, or is it really, hey, it's not an aircraft, we're using a drone, but you're really hiring a mapping company to come out and do this for
Mm-hmm.
you?
Yeah, for sure. So, what our expertise is like mapping basically and data providing, right? And so, what we have is a system that our users can purchase the hardware or rent the hardware, right? And then, depending on what model that they prefer, there's also this SaaS component of data analysis, because we have to push it through our pipeline, right? And so, if you're locked in, you've got a long, large project, you're better off buying a full hardware system, and then you have some SaaS along on the side. That system is designed so that anyone can use it. So if you have your own field workers, then you can just rent or buy directly off of us or one of our resellers, and then go out and your field workers will use that system, right? And so they'll take it out in the forest, they press the button, and it flies where they want it to fly. We also have kind of other clients that are service providers, right? And those guys would rent or buy the drone off us, and then they would go to like multiple different clients and offer their services as a drone pilot and a data provider, right? And sometimes they add their expertise on the top. So they might say, oh, with the data, they'll add some planning layer, right? Or with the data, they'll design your future decisions for you. So those providers add also theirs on top. So, a lot of the bigger companies, they do all that in-house, and so they just want the hardware and they want the results.
Right.
So yeah, that's how it works.
Right. So kind of mix and match depending on the nature of that ideal customer profile. There's different avenues for them to engage with your technology. Now, I'm going to rapid fire off the top of my head, probably questions you've had to answer the 5 millionth time. You could probably write an
That's fine.
FAQ, or you probably already have an FAQ on it,
Mm,
right? But when we think about data collection right away, people are going to ask around the drone and how, its runtime, how long can it run?
mm,
And
mm,
secondly, they're going to ask about the data, the precision, the accuracy and precision of the data.
mm. Yeah.
So maybe let's start
Mhm.
with the hardware side, and I've got a bunch of them just kind of spinning through my head, rapid fire.
Sure.
Well, maybe start with the hardware. It's like what do we think about this? Like 1 hour runtime, 10 minutes, 5 hours. What does that look
Yeah.
like for Deep Forestry?
So it's a moving target because drones these days are going crazy, right? So every year our KPIs are increasing, right? And so we do have a heavy sensor stack on this system, but we've got like 2 or 3 systems and on their way out. So this here is the and what I'm showing here is the LiDAR hardware and the cameras and the control system. And that control system can go onto different platforms. So our
Okay, cool.
manufacturers are delivering kind of smaller versions of it that are focused on going to dense forests where there's a lot of value there. And then others want like a larger version that'll stay in the area much longer. So we rely on our manufacturers to give these different size platforms, but all of our architecture works on any sized platform, right? So we've got kind of a medium sized here. I would call it the old technology at the moment. It's like the battery life, I think we're doing 1 hectare to 2 hectares. So up to 5 acres is what I've seen in one survey, basically. Now, when we talk about 5 acres, I'm really talking about every single tree measured precisely all the way up the stem. And when I say precisely, the accuracy is better than you can do manually, right? So we're better than human error or equal to human error kind of with a tape or anything like that. We have very specialized algorithms that make our system way more accurate than anything else on the market. And that's been confirmed by our resellers. We've also tested it against harvester data. So the harvester has measured it all the way up the stem from the Australian government. And I think they got 1.6 centimeters mean absolute error compared to the harvester measurements all the way up the stem of the tree, right? And 1.6 centimeters mean absolute error is probably from the harvester, right? So the harvester is bouncing up and down along that stem, and ours is kind of an algorithmic approximation of that system. And
Right.
I can maybe just share something here so you can see the data. I'll describe it for your listeners as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so as you're loading that up, so sounds like the quality of the data is pretty tight, and often I use the analogy you brought it up earlier in terms of carbon plots. Often the accuracy and precision of carbon plots is much tighter, if you will, than maybe a traditional cruise, as an example. So maybe in the example you're giving, maybe just keep that in the back of your mind for context, given carbon's so hot and people have views, how does it stack up against, carbon requirements for field mensuration?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's way better than anything that I've ever seen. I mean, I haven't seen anyone be able to kind of uh, suggest that our accuracy isn't better than anything else available on the market. The question is, how is that person who's selling the credits designing their data acquisition method? And for us, what we can do is we can get it at a really big scale. So I'm just going to zoom in here. Actually, I'll zoom in on one of the clients who's allowed us to kind of share their data here in Spain. You can see kind of the 3D model of their whole forest here. So I'm just kind of showing the digital twin and the machine learning and what it looks like. And so you can see here in 10 minutes, you literally have every single tree perfectly mapped in 3D with the machine learning tools here to isolate each individual tree. And if you click on each of these trees, you actually get images from every angle of that tree. It's not live in this demo session, but I can kind of show it to you and prove it to you perhaps a little later. Yeah, so you can really, even when you have your 3D model, not only do you have this data in 3D of the forest itself, but if you click on an individual tree, you can get all of the images associated with that tree from each different angle so that you can see and make decisions. For example, with carbon credits, is the tree alive? All these kinds of different things that you can measure. So in terms of accuracy, it will be up to the person and the regulator on how to use this data, because I think what I've seen in the past is, like a terrestrial LiDAR scanner or a 10 meter by 10 meter square, and then that being scaled up. And with us, you don't need to do that kind of scaling up at all. You can really just survey the whole place entirely. You can see here, this client's kind of just surveyed the whole forest, and all of the information with every individual tree. And you can export that also as like a geoinformatics file. And then you can drag and drop that directly into Google Earth, and you can get that information there in kind of like an API format where you could just integrate it into your GUI or whatever you're doing on the back end to show your carbon credits or calculate these kinds of things. So all of the information is entirely like digital and available at the press of a button.
Right.
So it's really the next level.
Right. So when you launched this web map viewer here with the various projects, I saw little clusters of numbers showing projects around the globe. So is it
Yep.
safe to say that, again, you mentioned Deep Forestry started in around 2018, I think. So lots of work that's been happened. So this is not early, Levi, right, in the sense of, hey, we're still in labs thinking about it. We've got projects by the looks of it, Western US, Eastern US, Scandinavia, Western Europe, some in my geography ain't good. What is that? China
We
or
got Japan, we got Australia, like we got one of
so
the biggest construction companies, or the biggest construction company in Japan has been our client now for like 2 or 3 years.
right.
So they've surveyed all over Japan, and the Japanese have a very high expectation on usability and professionalism. So the system really is very mature and ready for market. And what we're finding is that we're selling this to early adopters who understand the value of taking a different approach to forestry. And those guys are getting a massive lead in their region. So we're getting like one reseller or one early adopter in like Spain or the US or wherever. And all of their regional influence kind of starts sparking out because people start seeing like, oh, wow, I could use this for this. We could do that. And the beauty of the system, it's so versatile that all we have to say is like, yeah, let's train the AI to do your thing. And let's train the AI to do your thing. So really, and what's happening with the scalability is that the the batteries are getting better, right? The cost of the LiDAR is dropping like a stone. So LiDARs used to be expensive. Now a camera and a LiDAR are the same price, right? So you can't say cameras have this advantage anymore. And then they're getting lighter. So a half weight LiDAR means I'm in the air for 10 extra minutes, right? And the system that we're about to release, I think, in the next 2 or 3 months, that's got a 30-minute battery life. And then, it's not long before we just have two drones going at once, right? Because when one's in the air, you can just have another one, or beyond visual line of sight flying with the new government regulations. So it's kind of impossible to see a scenario because our pricing basically just stays level, right? So this is the cost to deliver the system, process the data and all of that. But the KPIs just keep increasing, right? So the early adopters are getting the market advantage. They're getting the data and they're thinking about how to use the data, but the inevitability of the KPIs just doubling or so every year or two means that it's not long before even the late adopters and the people who are grumpy and they don't want to do it that way are just a drone flies through their forest anyway because there's just so many of them. They're ubiquitous because of the added value.
Yeah.
So
So thinking of that, maybe two follow-on rapid fire FAQ questions. You touch on price. What can you share on that? Obviously, not specifics, but ballpark, because we know foresters are cost conscious, and I know there's a bunch of them listening, probably wanting to get a sense of order of magnitude. So maybe that's the first question. And the follow-on question of that is this really for you at the start talked about monoculture, maybe plantation-based forestry? I'm also thinking of those foresters out there in that gobbledygook, mixed tolerant
Mm,
hardwood forest that's just a mess, and they're probably looking
mm,
at some of these visuals going, is this really only for plantation base? So maybe those two
mm,
questions. What can you tell us about price, order of magnitude, so our foresters are
mm.
can level set? And then is this really for plantation-based forestry and less so about natural forests?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, we're charging just on the rental model direct with Deep Forestry. So our resellers can do all sorts of things. So I won't talk about them with the offers that they offer, but directly through us with the rental model that's ready to go right now. If you sign a contract, it's 5,000 euros per drone per month for unlimited machine learning and the hardware access. And basically everything's included. You just have to buy your own batteries, right? And the batteries are not that expensive. They're 500, 600 euros each. And so basically that's the comprehensive thing that you think in your head. And then it's about how, because it's unlimited machine learning and unlimited use, it's how often can you keep that drone in the air. And then what happens is, like, as the drones improve with software or hardware updates, because it's a rental model, we can just give you the more advanced drone with the better KPIs, right? So the KPIs just keep increasing, so you're getting more hectares per week or per month with each, like, progressive. Every quarter or something we get like better and better, and the pricing is staying the same at 5,000 euros per month. And if you think of this from like, hey, I'd like to purchase a drone and then get the price lower, you've got to go through our resellers. And what you'll find there, we have a model to make sure that we keep the price as low as we can for growth reasons. And what you'll find there is it'll be similar or better than something that's around about that 5,000 euros per month in terms of upfront capex and long-term benefit, right? So if you basically times the same number and then discount it a little bit, that should be about where it lands with most of the resellers. It depends on your region because there's import difficulties, there's batteries, so the resellers sometimes add value as well, and they might only deliver with that added value. It's a very high in demand product, so the trick is to get in kind of quickly and get ahead of the bunch.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, for sure. So thanks for sharing on that pricing side, and then around the plantation monoculture
Oh yeah,
side
yeah,
of
of course.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Sweden is actually I think they call it diversified forestry, which is like it's kind of a pre-planted for forestry, but it's like 3 or 4 different species that I wouldn't call like a tropical forest, right? Its intention is to be commercial, and there, it's working absolutely perfectly and really, really good. We've got some clients that are working in like different hardwood forests. We did hardwood forests in Japan. We've done hardwood forests in the US. What I would say is, if you're doing a hardwood forest, we always say that the system can do very difficult forests, but you wouldn't want to start there, right? You want to start in an open, easy forest. And if you have, uh, you know, 10,000 hectares of forest or something, you want to start with the easiest stuff and then progress as your pilots actually get more trained into the more difficult stuff, because the biggest risk of the system is pilot error. And so
Mhm.
what we do, they get a bit excited about how well it works, and they start to push the limits, like, oh, let's do this. And it says, do not do this. And oh, but I've seen it do it once. And when you push the limits, you'll find the limit eventually. So we just say, there's plenty of forest available that you can fly safely, and we can fly less safe in more difficult forest, but the pilot is the key weakness here in the system. And we can also make smaller systems, but we don't try that because we haven't flooded the easier forests first. So
Right.
it's a startup principle, start with what's easy, take the low hanging fruit and add the most value possible. And if people need that really dense, difficult forest, then they can wait 6 months so that they're happier with the system at that stage.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but yeah, we definitely do hardwood, and we've done it all over the world. We just don't recommend that you go to hard stuff. You want to start with easier, and the AI can be trained on anything. So it's in monoculture, you don't have to do any training. In diverse forest, you want to train 2 or 3 species. Think around 1,000 to 2,000 US dollars per species, and then that's kind of a little extra budget that you have to do to get that value in your region.
Right, for sure. Then obviously, because it's AI driven, the more data you have, data is a new oil, is beneficial. And you talked about new data that you collect just kind of reinforces or updates that
That's right.
learning
It's a
model.
reinforcing snowball effect, right? the new ways of learning and new systems get other clients in, and then those clients add their systems and their extras, like I want to add this or this to the system, and it can snowball. But some big clients, they want to put a barrier around so they get a competitive edge. So we kind of enable that, because we can say, you know, if you really want, we can make sure that your training labeled data only stays within your ecosystem and your competitors don't get that advantage. So if you pay us to, or our third parties to make the AI special for you, that can be an advantage that other people would have to also pay that and do all that. You don't get exclusivity. What you get is like, you've paid for it and this is kind of your domain. So now you're adding this extra value. So if you want, you can kind of get your elbows out and push the other competitors out, get an advantage on them. And if you prefer, like governments and universities or a lot of our just larger clients, they just want to see the product better, and then they share that added value throughout the community.
For sure. And so one of the things I always like is people who work in forestry. We joked about it in the warm up to the podcast. We often don't celebrate our wins. Foresters are foresters. I'll leave it at that statement. But can you name drop like the ones that you're able to name drop just for our listeners in terms of companies so that they can make an association go like, Levi's saying all these things, right? But it's like, who's really using this type of thing? Obviously, I'm sure there's many that want to stay confidential, but are there a couple? I know there's been some competitions you've won in other geographies, but can you name drop a few names so just so our listeners will,
Yeah,
oh, this is real.
I mean, what I can do is I don't want to share what my resellers are working on, because they're all working on securing massive clients and they're getting a big advantage, right? And they're these deals when they're doing like, I mean, hundreds of units, right? And hundreds of units at 5,000 euros a unit, it's a lot of money for these guys to secure. So I don't want to elaborate on those kind of deals, but they're in the pipeline in each different area with each different reseller in the region. One that I can share that's been with us for a long time is Kojima Corporation, because they were there with us from the beginning, and they really deserve to be congratulated for being early movers and smart movers in the Japanese landscape. The other one that I can share is that we won the CMPC uh, project
Forestry
for their
challenge.
water assessment. And so this is kind of basically our technology, both the below canopy surveying to make sure that they can measure the individual stems and put them into different allocations. So sawmill wood, plywood, chipwood, pulpwood, things like that, and do all of that at the press of a button automatically. But also they want to do sustainability. So we won the competition with our hyperspectral LiDAR sensor fusion system, which can be used for ESG methods, both on the large scale species identification, but also individual tree leaf water amount. This is the kind of things that we're doing there. There are a few others that I can add, but I don't want to do it too publicly, because these snowball effects, everyone's trying to get in first and trying to come in below the radar. So,
No, no,
but
that's
yeah,
great. Those are some names that people associate with, and the Foresight Canada Challenge. It's
that's the one.
notable,
Yeah.
right? I know you're just kind of like, oh yeah, we won
That's
this
public at least.
passing, not a
Yeah.
big deal, but yeah, you won that competition, so
Yeah.
congratulations on that side of
Thanks
things.
for that, Kevin.
Yeah. So with the time we have left, I just want to spend maybe 5 to 10 minutes picking your brain. I always say picking someone's brain, and everyone always says that doesn't really sound good. But as someone deep in the technology, I want to understand, or maybe our listeners, our viewers would appreciate understanding or getting a sense of how you look into the future. So the
Mm,
question I always love to ask is when we think maybe 3 to 5 years out to start, and then I'll push you to that
mhm,
10 mark, but to start 3 to 5 years out in deep
mhm,
forestry and the cool technology, what gets you excited? Like you got some machine learning, AI doing this work, you're already doing it at scale in different geographies. But what's next? What does Levi think about in terms of 3 to I'm really excited. The obvious ones, you touched on beyond visual line of sight. You touched on swarming
mhm.
technology and stuff. But 3 to 5 years out, maybe what are you thinking about
Yeah.
today?
The scalability of these systems, when you think about thousands and thousands of people, like you would know better than me how many thousands of forestry field workers there are in the world. And each one of them can have like a drone the size of a pizza box. I call it the pizza box stage. And it can just kind of go in their backpack and they use it sometimes. And if it crashes, They just unclick the wings, because right now we fly at like 2 meters per second, so we never crash, right? But if I could fly at 5 or 10 meters per second, right? And if it happened to, hit something, or you would just replace the wings and it would cost basically nothing. And I really see that as the future. It's like cost-effective drones. The LiDARs are now like 1,000 euros each or something like that, depending on, which manufacturer you go with. At least even the best manufacturers are getting down to 3,000 euros each. And what we can see is that I can even post that pizza box out to somebody, right? And then they can just use it for a day or a half an hour, and then they can post it back to me, or post it to another user. And all of that data the AI can just get better and better, so that anything that is allowed to be kind of open and shared and add value in decision making, we can share that out by collaborating with some of the biggest players. I don't want to mention the names that are in my investment round at the moment, but they really are the biggest players in the world when it comes to environmental and trees and digitalization in the tree sphere. And they're coming on our cap table to scale this out like an immense way. And so I see that. I mean, it's not even that far away. The investment that I have right now in this round, it's a relatively small round compared to other US rounds, is enough to get us there. The technology is ready to go. So I really do see this as like Google Earth, but for trees, and then with precision measurements as well. Because the thing that Google Earth doesn't have, when you've got the LiDAR, you can measure within, half a centimeter or a centimeter of anything. So it's adding that precision measurement as well. So that's kind of what I see in the future. And then one more thing, if I take this a little further,
Hmm.
is we've got kind of this hyperspectral sensor fusion system where you've got LiDAR, IGB, and hyperspectral. And that's because of a new way where in hyperspectral you can do a global shutter camera. So you can gather all the hyperspectral data on one pixel. And what that means is we can push that into the 3D domain with the LiDAR and run machine learning algorithms with that. And that data is like centimeter pixel or sub-centimeter pixel hyperspectral data in the 3D domain, which in orbit, you've also got those same hyperspectral cameras and those same LiDARs, right? So we're getting this massive resolution bump, and you're also removing the atmospheric interference, and you're removing maybe the canopy interference if you want to look below the canopy, right? Because we've got it in the 3D domain. And so now you can scale that up to a factor where, and you've got the field workers that are already out there, right? So they're already doing the work. So you don't need to, build a big group of people to go out there and do it. They're already doing it. And you could even have them on top of harvesters or on top of different things, all automated. And so you're gathering like centimeter pixel size hyperspectral data that can then be scaled up to orbit to make sure that if you go and survey perhaps in the emerging economies where there's not enough financing to do certain things, you can still add that value from the Western economies into those emerging economies through the AI machine learning that is coming from orbit. And so we don't generally let that data out, but we work with companies that are interested in that data to build those systems together, either within our ecosystem or within some kind of agreement where our business IP is kept secure.
Right. Very, very cool. So definitely use case around calibration and validation in terms of scaling
Yeah, exactly.
space more
Yeah.
level. Very, very cool. And so maybe 10 years out, as we look to kind of start winding down, 10 years out, what does that look like for Levi and Deep Forestry? Or as someone on the technology side, is it, you know what, that's just too far out. I can't even think that far out, like 10 years of change in technology. But maybe if I was to put you in that awkward spot and say,
Mhm.
what does 10 years look like from your lens and the things you see? What would your answer be to that?
My main goal would be to make sure that this technology that has historically, these kinds of systems, they've been sold like an autonomous LiDAR drone. It's been sold in the last few years for like 200,000 euros or something like that. And my goal is to make sure that like everyone in South America or everyone in India or everyone in Africa can actually get the benefits from those kinds of systems, and to bring those prices down to like 500 euros or maybe 100 euros. I don't know how good the technology curve can go. But what I want to see is that I can ship it out to a school who can then go and protect their local area just with the students. And it's that easy to use. And that might not necessarily be the best market start or the best vision for like how are we going to get this technology to scale. We might go bankrupt beforehand if we're too focused on how it can help everyone in the world. But I don't see any technological or technical reason or even business reason why this same level of technology can't have equal or more impact in the emerging economies than it does in the Western sphere. And if we can get the investment and if we can get everyone on board, that vision will make financial sense. So we can make profit the driver for positive change without having to sacrifice. Now, if we need to make some sacrifices along the way, I'm definitely going to be pushing for that. And it depends on who's on my board of directors that I'm going to have to convince to take some of those risks. But that's what I want for the company.
Very cool, very cool. So democratization of that data, extending that reach beyond the developed to other regions for maximum societal benefit, environment benefit, all sorts of benefits. That's amazing. Great way to wrap up. So when we think about people who are interested in following up, you mentioned, you're doing some wheeling and dealing is what I call it these days,
Yeah,
right? And people,
yeah,
it's hot. People are
yeah,
probably going to want to follow up with you. What's the best
absolutely.
way for people to reach out and get a hold of you, Levi, to talk some?
Very easy. If you type in deep forestry, we should come up first on the list or very right there. And there's a connection on the website. You can contact us, and that'll actually set you up with a meeting directly with me. Unless it's super flooded, then I have to kind of move it over. But it's very easy to contact me, and you can see this in the background. I'll show you the drones, and it's literally that easy. Click on the website, and you can contact me directly. Also, it's just my name at deepforestry.com, Levi. That's my email, so easy to remember. And you can use that to email me anytime. You can find me on LinkedIn, Levi Farrand, or CEO of Deep Forestry, and you should find me. Yeah, very happy and excited to talk to all the movers and shakers and early adopters, as well as in the middle if you're there. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hey, Levi, I really enjoyed the conversation with you. I really enjoyed learning more about deep forestry and your journey from the start to where you are today. And you're obviously hot, lots of excitement. You could sense it in the conversation, see it in the body
Yeah, for
language.
sure.
So congratulations on getting to where you are today. So thanks very much for carving out some time for this guy. And I'm looking forward to seeing you somewhere in the world at some point in time and maybe in real life form. So wishing you all the best.
Thanks, Kevin. It'll be great. You'll have to come to Sweden and have some Swedish fika, which is coffee and cake. It'll be
100%.
nice.
100%.
Yeah.
Good
All
stuff.
right.
Take care.